My name's Lura, and I'm an alcoholic. So thanks for having me. The Alana Club opened up about a year and a half ago, and we started this meeting about the same time, and Brantley, my husband, chairs this meeting. So he was like, hey, we want you to speak, and we hear in Alcoholics Anonymous that you never say no to an AA commitment, but because it was my husband, I told him to go shove it, And I can do that to my husband, but if it was someone else, maybe like Neil or, someone else, I would have said, it's an honor to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, but because it's my husband, it was a little different, but he put me on the schedule for November, he said, you're speaking in November, that's it. So here I am, and, I get nervous speaking. Hopefully, the nerves will go away in a few minutes. But I get nervous, and, every time I'm asked to speak in Alcoholics Anonymous, I get nervous. And when I think of the reason why, it's because I really deeply care about what you guys think of me. And I want people to like me. I do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes that can go to an extreme. And so tonight, my prayer is that I'll say someone that helps something, and that if I bomb this, we just forget about it, never talk about it again, okay? So my sobriety date is November 9th, 2014. My home group is But for the Grace of God Women's Meeting. We meet on Thursdays at 5:30 at St. Mary's, and I hope all the women will come. It's a great meeting. We have newcomers come, and they stay sober. And they come to our business meetings, and we have grown a lot. I started that meeting with my sponsor a few years ago, and it was just 3 of us with a coffee pot, and now there's 30 or 40 women that come every week. It's a good meeting. And so, the Alana Club, or this meeting, has been doing this thing where they have people speak around their birthdays. So I celebrated 9 years last week. Thanks. And, I woke up, it was my birthday, I got some calls, some texts, whatever, and then my mom called me. And I just think, oh, it's just another day, another birthday, After some time, it just becomes a little bit more normal that we stay sober. And my mom called, and she started singing me happy birthday, and it hit me, And I started crying, but I couldn't let her know that I was crying, obviously. I was like, oh, thanks, Mom. And she says, how does it feel? And I said, it feels good. And she said, it feels good over here, too. And it just hit me again, that what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous works, and that, it affects people's lives, what we do here. I know today that my alcoholism, my addiction, it affects people's lives. It oozes out of me, and my recovery does the same. It has the ability to positively affect people's lives. And so, hopefully tonight I'll be able to tell you about that process for me, because it has not been easy and graceful. I really have done sobriety imperfectly and messy, and I'm so grateful that here in Alcoholics Anonymous I don't have to show up and be good. I get to be just what I am. I get to be messy and afraid and angry or whatever it is. I get to show up just with all of that, and Alcoholics Anonymous welcomes me. So I was born into a normal family, a normal broken family. My parents, is this too loud? Am I yelling at you guys? Is it okay? Okay. My parents were divorced before I was born. I do not know how that math works out, because I think divorces take longer than 9 months, nasty ones, And they did have a nasty divorce, that lasted my whole life. And so I was born into this situation that was chaotic, But even so, I had a good childhood. I had a happy childhood. I have a lot of good memories, My parents are very human. They're very flawed, but they have a lot of love, and I had a lot of love in my home. And, I can see today that they did the best that they could with what they had. And no childhoods are perfect, no people are perfect. There's just no way around the fact that, again, life is messy, And so I was born into that situation, and I always knew that I wanted to be a drug addict. I don't know why I knew that, but it just seemed really glamorous to me, like the heroin chic look. I was really good at that look. It came naturally to me, I guess. And I just always knew. I don't know. And so, I believe that I was born with alcoholism, and not everyone believes that for them, but that is what I believe for me. And alcoholism is, the book and what I think is that it's a 3-part disease. We have an allergy, so when I put alcohol into my body, I want more. And not only do I want more alcohol, but I instantly want cocaine, and cocaine is great with other drugs as well, and so I have an allergy to drugs and alcohol, and I have a mind that when I'm sober tells me I need to go get loaded. The only way to fix the way I feel is to get loaded. And then I have a spiritual malady, this thing inside of me that just doesn't feel quite right. Something feels off. Something's not right, like my socks don't fit, or my shirt is like too itchy, or it's just not right, And that is what I believe to be alcoholism, and I have always had that. I remember from a very young age feeling like I just didn't belong, or I just was in the wrong place at the wrong time, always. And so, going out into the world as a child with that type of feeling inside, and then this, thinking that drugs and alcohol are cool, really put me in a bad position, I'll tell you guys. And so, the first time I ever drank alcohol, I was about 11, maybe 12 years old, and I needed that drink. I needed it. I remember the first time I took a drink, it was this warm whiskey that we had in a Pepsi bottle in a field or something, or a bush, because we were children, and I just remember feeling that feeling, I can take a breath, and I knew from that moment that my primary purpose was to get loaded. And, I knew that I wanted to go out and experience all of the wonderful drugs and chemicals that we have in this world. And I did. And I was good at it, And so, from there I started stealing people's pills, and I started smoking pot, and I started doing all of that stuff, and before not before long, I found myself in this kind of scary situation of a child that's addicted to drugs and alcohol. Going through high school, that continued. I got in trouble. I got caught with some cigarettes and a pipe at school, and it just was very clear that things weren't going well. My parents always say that I was a really good kid until I turned 10 years old, and then just done. It was over. And so. This was about the time when people were still smoking oxys. And I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? I believe that I have alcoholism. I also was addicted to drugs, and I regret that just as much as maybe we don't want to hear about it in AA. But it is my story, and I'm not going to lie to you. So there was this situation where I came across about 500 Oxy 80s. And it was like the gates of heaven opened up. And I just walked into the pearly gates, and that was the point where there was no return for me. And I started smoking those oxys, and then when those ran out, I did what the next logical step, I think, is, I got strung out on heroin, and I was a 16-year-old girl in high school with no idea what I was doing and what I was putting myself into. And no understanding of what alcoholism and addiction is, because in my mind, I just needed to feel better, and I just needed to feel different. And if I don't have this, I'm not okay, and that is all that mattered. And so I went to treatment for the first time when I was just 17 years old. I had just turned 17. These 2 very large people came into my room in the middle of the night, and they said, "You're coming with me." And I was like, "Okay, cool, let's go." And they took me to detox, and then they took me to a wilderness program where I slept outside in the snow for 3 months. And I had never seen the snow. I'm from San Diego. It doesn't snow, So I'm like, oh, wow, this is different. And I actually really enjoyed that experience. Today, one of the ways that I experience God is by going outside. And there I was, sober for the first time, in years. It had been years. And I felt the peace of God out there. And then from there, I went to this treatment center in Provo, actually, where the doors lock behind you, and someone has to open them. And I lived in this, residential treatment center for troubled teens for 6 months. And I remember thinking that I was really offended that I was in a place for troubled teens. Like, I wasn't a troubled teen. I was just addicted to drugs, which is ridiculous. I can see the severity of it now, right? That people lose their lives around drugs and alcohol. And what I was doing was incredibly unsafe, and my parents were afraid. They were very, very afraid. And my mom didn't know what else to do, and so she sent me away. And I understand. I was mad about it, until I did my 5th step, and there was nothing to be mad about. She did it out of love, it was the right thing to do. Anyway, so I'm in this treatment center, and the longer I'm there, it's like the clock is ticking, I can just hear it in the background, like my eyes starts twitching the longer I'm there. I'm like, God, I gotta get out of here, And I did eventually. I came back home, and I moved in with my dad. I'm still so nervous, you guys. I moved in with my dad, and I stayed sober a whole 7 days. A whole 7 days. And you guys, like, at this point, like, I know most people go their whole lives without doing heroin. Like, I know that. And so I think, okay, I just won't do that, but I'll drink alcohol, because normal people drink alcohol, which is true. Normal people do drink alcohol, but I do not have a normal reaction to alcohol. And I cannot drink alcohol normally, nor can I drink alcohol without doing drugs. And I had to prove that to myself time and time again before something happened and I got here. So I got back, and, it's pretty clear pretty quickly that I can't stay at my dad's house because he doesn't want me doing drugs in his house. Surprise, surprise. And so I move in with a boyfriend to the trailer park. And it was a really nice trailer park, you guys. It was. They had a pool. Like, I thought I was living the dream. And, I tried doing all of the normal things that young people do. Like, I'm 18 at this point, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a job. I get a job at Starbucks. I start going to this community college. And I start going through this cycle where, like, I'll try and get my life together and start doing these things, and then I can't show up to work anymore, and I can't show up to class, and I fail school, and I lose the job, and then everything turns to shit. And then I have to, like, call my dad and be like, can I come back home, And time and time again, that man let me come back home because I'm his daughter and he loves me. And I put my parents through so much. I don't have children, but I can't imagine how scary that is for a parent to not know what's going on with their daughter or thinking, my daughter's going to die. And, the reality of alcoholism and addiction is that this does kill people. It does take people from us. And the fact that I'm here today is the greatest miracle that has happened in my life. And all of you as well, I want to stay sober. I want to have a life. But I was just too blinded by alcoholism to see it. I was living in this false reality. I had this mindset that I was okay, or what I was doing was okay. And so, I'll just tell a few stories. Neil always tells me to say funny stories, and I gotta be honest, I really don't have that many funny stories. What I was doing was not fun, okay? I'm just gonna be clear about that. I was not partying, I was not going out to the clubs, I was not doing any of that shit. I was getting loaded, right? And I was blackout oblivion, gone. That's what my goal was, and I achieved it, If I had just put my, energy into better goals, I would have been great, but I didn't, that's what I wanted to do. And so, so this goes on for a few years, right? As it does. And I'm living at my dad's house, and I would do this thing where I would steal my dad's debit card, and I would go and I would buy something and I would take cash out. And one day I just took a little bit too much money, and he said, where did this money go? And, I have a stepmom. She's been my stepmom my whole life. And there came a point where she said, it's either her or me. She needs to leave or I'm leaving. And that's the kind of stuff that we do, right? And so, obviously my dad says, you need to go. And so I go and my mom takes me in. And so I go to this outpatient treatment center. It's like a 90-day program, okay? And I end up staying there for 9 months. And my plan is that I'm going to join the military. and then I'll just like get my life together because I'm in the military. Like, what other choice would I have? But it turns out that in the military, there's this test that you have to pass. It's called a drug test. And I was incapable of passing that. So this was my big plan, and then I'm living with my mom. My drug dealer's sleeping in the closet. And, like, it's just a mess. And my mom is taking medications to sleep at night. She's like putting a sound machine on. She's like stuffing towels under the door just so she can like have a moment of peace from me. Do you know what I mean? Because what I learned about myself in sobriety is that when I was drinking, and even sometimes in sobriety, I will control you by fear of if you don't act right, I'm going to lose my shit. And my mom was afraid I was going to die, and I controlled her with that. And that is something that I have had to make amends for to her, because that is absolutely not okay, right? The money, the situations, whatever, that is nothing compared to the fear and the manipulation that I put on that woman. And so she knows what's going on, because she's finding my drugs, she's finding my needles, like she's finding the stuff. And here I am living in her home, and the plan is that I'm going to go to the hospital, and they're going to take me for detox, and then I'm going to go to this treatment center. Well, we tried the plan. It doesn't work, right? Because I leave, and I go get loaded. And the time it did work is the time that I went to detox and came here to Utah. And so I come home one day, and she has this woman there. Her name is Teresa. She's been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for like 30 years at this point. And she's just sitting there. And she says, "Come sit down." And this woman, I didn't know it at the time, but she 12-steps me. And she just sits with me, and she talks to me about her alcoholism and her drug addiction. She doesn't say anything to me like, "You need to stop. If you do this, that you'll get better. You need to do this and this and this." She just spoke to me about her experience. Because up until that point, I had a lot of very well-meaning people telling me that I should be doing something different, right? I had doctors telling me, "You need to take this medication, you need to do this and this." I had therapists, I had parents, I had all these well-meaning people giving me a rational solution to alcoholism. Rational solutions for people like me do not work. They just don't. Like, I can't be like, if I just got a job and worked really hard, I would stop drinking. I wish that worked. If it did, I would not be here, because I did not want to live the life that I was living. I didn't want to do it, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And I hit this point. There just were all of these things that came together at the perfect moment. And I got here within seconds and inches, you guys, like literal seconds. And all of these things came together at the perfect time. At this point, like when this woman was 12-stepping me, I was tired. Like the fight was gone, And she sat with me, and somehow the voice came into my head, and it said, "You need to go to the hospital now. You're not going to make it if you don't leave." And I said to my mom, "We need to go now." And she took me to the emergency room, and that woman, that member of Alcoholics Anonymous, saved my life. Because I would not have sat there if she was not there talking to me. And that is what we do for each other. And this woman was like 20 years sober at the time. She didn't say, just leave it to someone with 1 year or 6 months or 10 years or whatever. She went out of her way, and she came and talked to me. And she saved my life. And I want to be that kind of member in Alcoholics Anonymous. So we go to the hospital, and I tell this woman, we had a plan, okay? The plan was that I was going to tell them that I was going to kill myself. So they would take me, because they generally don't take people for opioid detox because, you don't die from it. And so I told this woman at the front counter or whatever, like, "Hey, I'm going to kill myself. I'm just here to get checked in, like, like the plan's working." And so they take me back right away, as they do. And my mom looked at me straight in the eyes, and she said, "This is your problem, not mine. I'm leaving." And she left. And I sat there for a day or two, and I detoxed. I detoxed off of all of the things that I was doing, which did include something happened to me, something that I can't explain, something that I didn't force, something that I didn't ask for, and that something is that I had a first step experience. Because we have first step experiences out there, right? We have them out there, and then we come here, and sometimes we have them here as well. But the grace of God entered my life, and what that meant is that I was willing to do something different. And I remember this so clearly. This woman came in, this social worker came in, and she said, "This was the result of your drug test, is that correct?" And for the first time ever, I didn't lie. I just said, "Yeah." I didn't say, like, "No, that's not right. It must have been in the pill," or whatever, like just all of the crazy stories we make. I just said, "Yeah, that's correct." And she said, "Do you want to go to detox?" And I said, "Yes." And then this other person came in, I think it was the nurse, and she said to me, "If you just stay away from those people, you'll be fine." And it was like my moment. The moment that I knew so incredibly clearly that it was no one else's fault, and there was no one in the world that I could stay away from that would keep me sober. It was my fault. I was those people. I was the one going out and getting loaded. And so I went over to, they said, your hold's up. Like, you can go to detox or you can leave. And I had a decision to make. And thank God, I chose to go to the detox. It was a 28-day program or whatever, and they kicked me out early because I wasn't going to the therapy sessions. My insurance wouldn't cover it or something. I don't know. But, after about a week, my family started to visit, and they said, "We think that you should leave San Diego." And my impression was that I was just going to go back to my mom's house. Like, that's how delusional I was, that I was just going to go back and live my life and stay sober effortlessly. And it was so obvious that that wasn't happening. My mom had started going to Al-Anon a few years before I got sober. And those damn Al-Anons, they saved my life. They saved my life through my mom. They did. And I'm very grateful for Al-Anon. And so they said, we think you should leave. And this is the most spiritual thing I've ever done in my life. I said, "Okay, whatever you say, I'll do it." That is the most spiritual thing we can do here in Alcoholics Anonymous, is to put up our hands and say, "Fine, your ideas must be better than mine because my life is shit and I can't keep doing this." And so they found, so I moved to Utah because my brother used to live here. So my brother, he did this wild thing. He went to college, he graduated in 4 years, he got a job, and then he lived his life. Do you know what I mean? Just the craziest thing. And he got a job here after he graduated from college. So they said, "Well, you can move to Utah because someone can pick you up from the airport." And that is the only reason that I am here today with you. And just the hand of God, working in my life already. So I get on the plane. They find a sober living out here. I get on the plane. I'm so scared. I move out here at the end of October. My sobriety date is in November, so, things are happening when I get here. And it's snowing already. And I'm, really irritated about it. I don't have boots. I don't have a coat. I'm, in San Diego, flip-flops, you know what I mean? We wear flip-flops year-round. And so I get here, I get off the plane, and the doctor at the detox had given me a 30-day prescription for Ambien because I can't sleep. I need Ambien, And I take all 30 of those pills in 3 days and drink all of the beer in my brother's fridge and then move into the sober living telling them that I have 30 days sober. And this is how I get my start in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a good start. So I move into this sober living, and they say that these are the requirements for living there. You need to get a job, you need to get a sponsor and start working the steps, and you need to go to a meeting every day. And I think that's a bit excessive, don't you think? Every day? And it was not excessive. It was exactly what I needed. Because my opinion, my experience is that we don't go from that kind of life to getting loaded all day, every day, to, I can just go to a meeting once a week and get my life together. That's absolutely not my experience. My experience is that I have to come here first. I have to learn how to show up to AA first. I have to have a commitment first. And then I can go out into the world and show up and work and have a life. And so, I really don't have a choice. I don't have anywhere else to go. And so, again, the most spiritual thing we do here, I say, okay, fine, I will do that. And so I do. I start going to these morning meetings. There was this guy that lived close to the sober living I was at. He would take me and some other women to meetings, and he would go to morning meetings. And so I was going to morning meetings, apparently. And so there was this Saturday meeting that is now held here, and there was a Sunday meeting, a big book study. And this guy would take me to both of these meetings. And there was this woman at these meetings that I love dearly, and she laughed. She had a husband, she had a job, and she had a car. And I thought, that's the one, that's her. And she also would go outside after the meeting, and she would put on this coat, and she would put on gloves, and she would smoke like this, and she would say, my husband doesn't know I smoke. And then she'd put her gloves off and go home. And I was just like, if this woman can stay sober and still be an imperfect human, I'm going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And it has been through people's imperfections that I have been able to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because if I get here and you all are happy, joyous, and free all the time, and everything's great, this is just another place that I don't belong. Because my experience is that I get sober and something inside of me is like yelling for help. Like there's just something that I need to do. And what I did with that angst is I put it into step work. And so I asked this woman to sponsor me, and she said no. And then I asked her again, and she said yes. You just have to be really just ask them again, okay? Be really adamant. And this woman, she said yes, and she started taking me through the steps. And she saved my life. I remember her coming to my sober livings for step work, and she didn't know this at the time, but she would give me step work, and then I would look it up of the atheist version of the steps, and I was really working the atheist version of the steps of AA. And that does exist if you want to Google it. But it didn't matter because I was doing the work, and the result is the same, right? The result when we get to the 12th step of having a spiritual experience based off of, the steps or however it's worded. I didn't say that right, but so I started going through my step work. And I remember writing my 4th step, and I really put my heart and my soul into my 4th step. I really did. I took that shit seriously because I don't know why, but I knew that my life was at stake. And so I did, and then, I read her my 5th step. She brought me into her home, and we sat on these comfortable couches, and we did a lot of step work on those couches over the years, a lot, and I remember having some big, awakenings during that time of when I was reading it to her. The one I can think of now is I was always resentful at my stepmom. She was my stepmom my whole life. My dad got married to her, real quick. He was on it. And and I was resentful at her because I thought she didn't love me like she loved her other kids, like her biological children. And I remember my sponsor just saying, well, of course. Why would it be any different, And she just had this way of saying things to me that put things in perspective of well, of course it would be different with you. It's not a bad thing, that you're her stepchild. It could just be different. What's wrong with that, And I just started to have this experience of a change in perception, and the way that I felt started to change, I remember coming to meetings when I was in my first few months of sobriety feeling really, really uncomfortable. I would sit in a meeting and I thought that everyone was staring at me, which is the epitome of self-centeredness. And I remember talking to my sponsor about that. I feel uncomfortable. And she said, that is your alcoholism. That is your self-centeredness. You think everyone's thinking about you. You think everyone's looking at you. Everyone's thinking about themselves. They don't care about you. They're just there trying to get well, just like you're trying to get well. You can be an alcoholic among alcoholics. You can be just a person in the world. And I started to have that experience that she was talking about. And so, the time came for me to go and make amends. I was about 9 months sober. Well, first of all, I will say that I did lie about my sobriety date for a while. And I had to confess to that. And it's not that I was lying. I just really was sick enough to where I couldn't see that me taking those 30 Ambien in 3 days and drinking all those beers was not sobriety. Like, I honestly didn't know. And I don't know why I just said that, but but I did have to come clean about that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And so when I was actually 9 months sober, is around the time where I was making my amends, and I went home to San Diego for the first time. And I was scared. I was really afraid. And I remember getting there, and we went to lunch, and my sister, my older half-sister, she looked at me and she said, "Why are you here?" She was so mad at me. And I was like, "I'm 9 months sober. Don't you know?" But that just shows that it sometimes can take a lot of time to rebuild, the things that we hurt and the people that we harm. But I made amends to my dad first. And, like I was saying earlier, the biggest harms that I caused people was I took away their sanity. I took away their freedom, and I took away the peace in their home, and I stole their money, and I was disrespectful, and I broke their rules, and I was 20 years old when I got sober. I was still really young, and it affected them, and so I made amends for all of these things with my father. I said, I was disrespectful, I affected your marriage, I stole your money, that type of thing. And I said, I want to pay you back the money, in very small increments at a time, And so I made this deal with him that I was going to send him $25 a month for the rest of his life. And he patted me on the head and he said, "It's okay." And, from there, our relationship has grown and it has gotten better. And I don't want to scare anyone, but I am in charge of his will when he dies. Can you believe that? And, we have a good relationship today, and I've been able to show up and make the phone calls and say, "Hi, Dad, how are you? What's going on in your life? Can I come see you next month?" Things like that. And that has meant the world to me. As my dad gets older, and he's, losing his memory, and calling me and saying, "Dinner's on the table." And I'm like, "Dad, I'm in Utah. I'm not there. I can't come eat dinner." So, that's just meant the world to me. And I did the same thing with my mom. And I had that conversation with her, and I apologized. And I had my mother tells her she identifies as a recovering Catholic and a Buddhist. And I like that combination. It's good, And so we went out to this Buddhist monastery. She wanted me to come with her. There was a 12-step retreat that her Sangha, which is like a Buddhist community, it's called a Sangha, that they put on. And there were all of these 12-steppers there. And it was the coolest experience ever. And it was like the type of place where you eat in silence, and it was so uncomfortable. I had to leave the monastery to go smoke a cigarette because you weren't allowed to smoke on campus, and so I had to sneak out and smoke a cigarette. And I made amends to her there, and it was really beautiful, And I remember just feeling so much better, I had a lot of freedom in those. There were some other amends, and I did do the $25, or I do the $25 with her as well. And so I still do that. I still send them $25 a month. It's been 9 years now. I don't know how much money that is, but it's absolutely not what I took from them. And, today, when I send that money, it's not about the $25. It's about the fact that they know that I remember and that I care, that I care about what I did, and that it's still not okay. It's still not okay, that I still have to make that amends to them. And there were some other ones. There was this one, the guy that I lived in the trailer park with, I owed his parents an amend. because I took advantage of them. I lived off of them when I shouldn't have, right? I was an adult. I should have been living off of like a job and stuff. And so I put off that amends for a long time. I think it was maybe like 4 years before I did that amends. Sometimes amends take us a long time, because I was really afraid. And I remember talking about it to someone. It was Diego. And he said, "How free do you want to be?" And I was so mad at him. I was like, stop it, Diego. I don't want to hear that shit. But he said it to me, and I heard him. And today, I want to be free. We get a lot of relief, or we can get a lot of relief here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, we can get relief in meetings, in phone calls. I can feel better. But how am I actually going to achieve freedom? For me, that has been a journey that I have not yet mastered. I have moments of freedom. Maybe I have periods of where I feel spiritually free, like I feel free of myself. But I want freedom. And so I heard when he said that, and I went out and made that amends. It was so awkward, but it was done. It was done. And there were some other ones as well, but so I'll just talk about some things in sobriety that have meant a lot to me, And so going on through the steps with my sponsor and trying to sponsor people so imperfectly. Like, I was just such a bad sponsor for such a long time. I never knew what to say. I was like, you should just pray about that, And just trying, having the intention of I'm going to go to this meeting and I'm going to try and find someone to help, It kept me coming, and I started to create this fellowship and this love here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Throughout this time, I'm working. My first job, I worked at Denny's. I worked the swing shift at Denny's, and I remember my rent at the Sober Living was $500, and the first month that I paid my own rent there, I took $500 in ones to my house manager, and I said, "Here's my rent." And I was so excited because I had never paid my own rent. There I was, 21 years old. I got sober just before my 21st birthday, and I had never supported myself. And so I was like, okay, so I need to work and pay my bills and all this stuff. When I got here, I didn't have a car. I had no skills, no education. I just didn't have anything. And I had to work for all of that. I had to work very hard for all of that, and I'm very grateful that no one handed me those things, that I had to work, and that my life, it means something to me because I have worked damn hard for it, day after day, waking up. We talk a lot about in here the next right action. And most of the time, it's like waking up when the alarm goes off, getting to work on time, saying good morning, doing what needs to be done. I mean, most of the time, that is the next right thing. And day after day, doing those things, my life started to get bigger, and it started to get better. And I could start, affording things, like going out to eat and doing stuff. And I did get a car when I was about maybe 9 or 10 months sober. I got this piece of shit car. It was so bad, but it was my car, and I loved her, This car, I took it to the airport once to go to a wedding, my aunt's wedding. And I got back, and the car had been stolen, you guys. From the Salt Lake City airport, they had a picture of the guy stealing it. And I was so upset because I couldn't afford another car, you know what I mean? And so I was sad, showing up, taking the bus again. I took the bus everywhere. I was just always on the bus, And then the cops call me, and they say, "We found your car in West Valley." And I go get it, and the car's fine. In fact, they had cleaned the car. I think some people doing meth stole it because they cleaned the car, but they left my 9-month chip in there, And I just thought, I hope you come, I hope you come in here with us. And so I got the car back, But I remember having this thought at the airport when I had to call someone for a ride, you know what I mean? I had this thought maybe if I had driven my car home, I would have gotten in a bad accident. And I just don't know. I just don't know what the result would have been if this wouldn't have happened. And I think that's really when I started to understand what the third step means, of giving my will and my life over to God, meaning that I just don't know. I can't know. And if I just accept and go with the flow and just slow down a little bit, I can have an experience of joy, you know? And so I drove that car around for a year until it got stolen again. And this car just kept getting stolen. It was wild. And they stole it outside of my apartment, and then they found it in Wendover. And Brantley went and took me, and that's when, it began. And he took me to Wendover, and we gambled, and I won some money. It was so fun, and I got the car back, and it was fine again. It was just wild. And so here I am, going to school, doing some things, right, or trying to do some things at least. And so one day I wake up, I'm maybe like 4 years sober or something, and I have this thought, like, I think I might stay sober. I need to do something with my life. Like, it was kind of like a daunting thought. Like, I got to do something with my life, And so I woke up one day, and I had this knowing that I should go to nursing school. And so I enrolled in nursing school, and 3 years later, I became a nurse. And I was working this job. I was an office manager for a lawn company. I worked there for about 5 years, and I learned all of these really cool skills when I was working there, like how to be pleasant even when like you don't want to be pleasant at work. Like, I learned that. And there was the boss, the guy that owned this company, he was a very kind man. He treated me very well, but for some reason, I just couldn't stand the guy. Like, I just couldn't stand the guy. And I went through this every winter. We wouldn't be treating lawns, and so we would be doing all this stuff throughout the winter to get ready for the next year. And I would work really closely with him over the winter. And I'm, like, at work, like, not okay, like, visibly irritated. And so I start doing this inventory and writing this out. And, like, what about this irritates? Like, why am I so irritated, right? And in the mornings, I'm like praying. No, I'm not praying. I am begging. I am begging for patience, and I am begging to be kind. And I have this experience at this job where things kind of just like softened for me through the like practice of what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. It talks about we practice these principles in all of our affairs. All of our affairs. That means work also, if you didn't know. It means work also. And so I'm like praying for kindness and patience. I'm doing the writing. I'm calling my sponsor. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work. She's like, all right, you got this. You'll be fine. And, I find myself just like changing, like right in front of my eyes, changing. And learning these like really important skills for the job I have now, and I realize this about myself, which is, I think I said it earlier, that if I'm irritated and you know it, then you'll act a certain way, or I think you'll act a certain way, right? And just wanting things to be different, wanting things to be my way, that is no way to live. It is no way to treat people. And here I am 5 years sober, in this predicament with my boss that's like giving me raises for inflation and stuff. Like, he was so nice. And so anyway, the time comes. Well, I made an amends to him. I said, hey, I've been really irritable. I apologize. It's not okay for me to act like that. And he said, oh, it's okay. So nice. And I'm like, it's not okay, but thank you so much. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you employing me. And from then on, I worked there another few years, and we had a great relationship. And I left that job on good terms, and it was not the first job I left on good terms. But when I was drinking, I never left a job on good terms. Never, not once. And so I had this experience of like leaving a job and being like, thank you so much, and then being like, you always have a job here, and I'm like, thanks. And I remember the last day, my boss, he bought me lunch, and then he bought me ice cream, and he shook my hand, and he said, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And, wow, I never thought things like that were possible for someone like me, And so I start working at a hospital. I went to school for 3 years to take care of sick people, and then I started working, taking care of sick people, and I thought, what the fuck is this, And it was really hard. Oh, man, it's been hard. And so I start working nights, and I'm just like afraid, all the time. And I was kind of nervous because I work in an acute care setting, and I give lots of pain medication, actually. And that kind of scared me, And I remember talking to my sponsor and talking to different people, like I've learned here that we talk about things. Like when I'm plagued with something or when I'm afraid, I need to talk about it. I can't just keep that inside. That doesn't do me well. So I remember this one day I'm driving to work. I'm working night shift. I'm a new nurse. I'm like newly off orientation on my own. I'm afraid I'm going to kill someone, like for real. And I called Jessica because I was driving to work and I had this overwhelming feeling that like if I went into the hospital, something bad was going to happen. I was going to steal meds. Like I just was like overwhelmed with fear. And I remember calling Jessica and she's like, say a prayer. I'm like, okay. And so I say a prayer, I walk into the hospital, and guess what God does? This is so obvious. He gives me a little newcomer nurse. This is what God does for me. I show up, and there's a little nursing student that is bright-eyed and bushy and just so excited to learn, and she just follows me around everywhere all night. She will not leave my side. She's just like right here, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Can I try? Just like, oh, honey. And like, this is the thing. This is how God shows up in my life. But what I have to do is I have to take the action, and I have to talk to someone, and then I just have to put my best foot forward, and I have to try. It's like, we talk about the third step, and I always, when I sit down with a sponsee, I talk about, electricity. It talks about that in the big book. Like, I trust that when I come into this building, the electricity will be here. But I have to pay the bill, and I have to flip the light switch. That's my part. I don't question how the electricity works. I have no clue where this comes from, but I just trust that it's going to work if I pay the bill and if I flip the switch. And that's how God has worked in my life. I mentioned earlier that I was working the Atheist 12 steps, which did me well. I mean, like, we just start where we're at, that's it. We just start where we're at. There's nothing else to do. There's nowhere else to start. We just start one day and we continue. We don't stop. So I'm at work, I'm working as a nurse, and it starts getting easier. I moved to the day shift, which is great because I feel better when I work, not in the middle of the night. And I start to get really irritated that people are sick, that the sick people are really sick. Like, I'm serious. This is ridiculous, I know. But I do. And I have this, we'll call it an incident at work, where I find myself, I wouldn't say yelling, but like talking very sternly to a doctor. And because I feel like they had whatever. I'm still kind of irritated about it. Can you tell? But I'm talking to my sponsor about this situation where I acted inappropriately, where I acted rashly, and I got angry instead of communicating like an adult. I found myself just talking over her and being like, no, we cannot, like, right? And she said in her way, she says, well, what are you doing in the morning before you go to work? And I'm like, I have to be there at 6 a.m. I'm not doing shit, And I have, just another experience of my powerlessness, like another step one experience where I just know in my soul that of myself, I am powerless over the way that I act and the way that I feel, and I need to go to God for help, and I need to go to you for help, and I need to be taking time in the morning before I go to work, where I have this job where everyone needs me, right? And it's just, all of us have jobs like that. All of us have lives like that. And I have to take the time to get quiet. And so what I started doing was putting my alarm clock on the other side of the room. It's funny because I was thinking about this talk, and yesterday, my alarm clock went off for work. I got it, and I went back into bed. And I slept in way too late, And so this for me, has been a process. It has not been perfection at all, ever. It has not been. And so I'll just talk about maybe my future for a second. My husband and I, we decided that we might have children. I don't want to scare anyone, but we might have children. And I am terrified, okay? Because I feel like if I were to get pregnant, it would be like a teenage pregnancy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd have to call my dad and be like, I'm so sorry, And then what if the baby comes out and its first words are like, crack, like, Kettle One vodka, like. terrified. Like I am. And, AA has given me a place where I can say that. Like, I can say that, like, this is the next step. I know it's the next step, but I'm really scared. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do any of it, But, I do know that my home is filled with a lot of laughter, and it's filled with Alcoholics Anonymous. It's filled with what we do here. And I have been on the receiving side of what we do here in AA because my husband is an alcoholic, And I have received the gifts for me and as a family member. And I'm so grateful for that. My life here, I don't feel the way that I felt when I got here at all. Never 1 minute do I feel that way anymore. I might feel uncomfortable. I might feel like my plans don't go my way, and I might feel afraid or whatever. But I don't feel that deep discomfort that I felt when I got here. And that's amazing. Alcoholics Anonymous has provided a sufficient substitution for alcohol. Because what I know about myself is that I'm lazy. Like, I want to feel good effortlessly. I want friends effortlessly. I want a life effortlessly. And that's not the way the world works. It worked with alcohol. It worked for some time. But when it didn't work, I had to ask myself, what do I want out of life? And when I got here to AA, I had to think, okay, I'm sober now. What do I want to do? Do I want to be happy? Do I want to be miserable? How do I want to live my life? And I have decided, one day at a time, that I want to live a life of freedom. And that includes being messy and being honest. Because saints don't stay here very long. We just don't, We have to get real and honest about the things that plague us. And my sponsor has been so good for me to take those things to her. Let's see, I have just a few more minutes. We talk a lot about God's will for us in this program. I know what God's will is not, right? God's will for me, and I believe for you guys as well, is not to sit on the couch and be drunk, to drink our lives away. I don't think that's what God wants for us. And I believe that God wants me to be happy. And I believe that God wants me to be useful. And when I pray and when I meditate, the voice of God for me has always been very slow, and it's always been quiet. And in order for me to hear that, I have to slow down. I have to get on the same wavelength, right? And I have to live my life in a way that is gentle and slow and kind. And when I think about, how do I go out into the world, I think about those intuitive thoughts that I get. When I have a problem and I pray, the answer is never like, you're going to go here on March 20th at 5 p.m. and you're going to meet the person and they're going to fix the problem. That's never what, the intuitive thoughts are. The intuitive thoughts are, you're doing okay. Everything's all right. Take a breath. Go to bed. Go to work. Those are the intuitive thoughts. And so I have to follow those. I'm just going to talk about the 10-step inventory for a second before I end. So I started doing, or maybe it's the 11th, whatever book you're reading. I started doing a nightly inventory when I was maybe 4 or 5 years sober, which is interesting because it's not an option to not make amends, but it's an option for me to do the 11th step for some reason. And so I started writing this nightly inventory, which was really hard for me because you have to open the book. And then you got to get a pen and you got to write it out. That's hard. There's a lot of steps. So I found that I had to make it really, really easy. And so I started writing the questions on this little note card and keeping it in this book that I keep by my bed. And then I realized that if I don't have a pen, it's just not getting done. You know what I mean? So I have to have a pile of pens, that I have to restock every week or so. And so I'm doing my nightly inventory, right? This is what I do at the end of the day, most of the time, not all of the time, but I'm writing my inventory, and Brantley, my husband, he's like, hey, I want to go to bed, turn the light off. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm writing my inventory. Leave me alone, I'm writing. This is important shit, And he's like, he'll turn over and be like, put selfish on there because you're keeping me awake at night. Anyway, thanks so much. That's all I have.